jet airplane, a technological wonder representing the evolution of one of modern man's most spectacular accomplishments, flight. Building an airplane is an enormous job. Just one 747 has over 6 million parts, half of which are fasteners, and nearly 200 miles of electrical wiring. What takes a team of engineers and hundreds of factory workers 43 days to create, a small crew of 6 operating heavy machinery can destroy in less than a week. It's extraordinary to see these planes reduced to rubble so dramatically. But in the name of progress, passenger safety, and the environment, the scrapping of these aircraft giants is necessary. As our society has developed into a digital world of downloads and cell phones, it's easy to take these jet planes for granted. Yet day after day, without fail, these giant metal birds transport thousands of passengers to their destinations and carry tons of cargo to the far reaches of the Earth. And in the process of making our world a smaller place, these tireless jet-powered workhorses log millions of miles each year. As a result, the average lifespan for an airplane is only 18 years. So what happens when a commercial airplane has reached the end of its intended life expectancy? Some continue on in the private sector. Others are used as realistic training environments for law enforcement agencies. And Hollywood has found its own grand and dramatic ways to use these aging airplanes for the big screen. But all in all, these endings are few and far between. Most are sent to aviation long-term storage facilities, boneyards, such as this one, an airplane cemetery where these once proud birds are grounded indefinitely, whether once the crown jewel of commercial fleet or an old warbird from a distant time. Most airplanes end up here, beneath the scrapper's blade. Built to withstand the forceful elements of the skies, these airplanes, once grounded, are no match for the relentless scrapping machines.
We watched him take the nose off. It took about 8 minutes for him to get the nose off of that jet over there. Pretty good. Pretty impressive.
The bottom line for a scrapped airliner is its reusable metals.
Still waiting on the shipment, sorry.
Looking for something?
1,200 cameras from Shanghai.
What's the coin? Where is it? Don't worry. Now try. Life is so much easier when you can see where everything is.
When I heard my name, I was a little bit surprised, and kind of at the same time, I kind of felt like it was going to happen after seeing everybody else's films, which were good.
I'm flabbergasted. I really didn't think it was going to happen, and I'm very, very happy.
I'm totally excited. Be creative, be yourself, and just let your heart lead you.
I joined this competition because I wanted to expose the possibility of using Nokia gadgets and electronic gadgets in medical research.
The contestants from other countries, I think they're very, very good, but now I got a chance again. And somehow, maybe you should watch out.
Presented by Nokia, connecting people.
My life is dedicated to maintaining the roots of my people.
The life of a rancher isn't easy, but it's the life I love.
Let me show you the real Australia.
Discovery Atlas, Australia revealed in 3 days on Discovery Channel. Discovery Atlas is brought to you by beautiful Thai Airways. Welcome to the untouched wilderness of Kakadu, Australia's largest terrestrial national park. Home to the ancient ways of the world's longest surviving human culture. A unique land that's listed as a World Heritage Area for both its cultural and natural phenomena. In a land of secrets, a beautiful maiden embarks on a journey of discovery to uncover once hidden truths, question ancient histories, and unveil stories that were once carried in the wind. Till now. Chinese Whispers starts Monday, 23rd October on Discovery Channel.
Fine dining's biggest names are back.
30 seconds, go, 30 seconds.
See culinary creativity at its most imaginative. And savor the dining experience of a lifetime.
It's not fun to go through life without taking a few chances. Why not with cuisine and why not with food?
The Rubino brothers are set to take on Asia in a new season of Made to Order. Tuesday night at 8:30 on Discovery Travel and Living.
Silent flight is engineered into an airplane's cabin. Part of that quiet you can credit to the use of a thicker outer skin, in keeping with the principle of integrity of design. It can be accomplished by using a heavy aluminum foil sandwich with a special plastic backing. Then, over it, apply thick blankets of fiberglass insulation. Now add triple panel windows with air spaces in between. And then round out the quiet engineering with a floating inner shell of panels that help exclude or help absorb nearly every bit of sound.
As the 20th century faded into history, so did the existence of hundreds of commercial and freight aircraft. During the early 1950s, many of the world's major airlines, including TWA, Japan Airlines, and Cathay Pacific, put into service the Boeing 707, Douglas DC-8, and Convair 880. At the time, the Convair 880 and 990 were considered the fastest jetliners in the world. But because of greater passenger capacity and longer range capability, the 707 and DC-8 were more widely used among the airlines. These first-generation jet airplanes were characterized by powerful engines, and like their counterpart automobiles of the time, they burned fuel at an alarming rate, nearly 500 gallons per hour per engine. Overall, they were expensive to maintain, produced high levels of exhaust emissions, and they were loud, very loud. The major airlines quickly understood that the key to their survival was in reducing fuel and maintenance costs. In pushing for a more environmentally sensible aircraft, the airlines created a formula for economic success. Cost-efficient aircraft resulted in lower ticket prices, encouraging more people to fly. One of the biggest aircraft manufacturers in the world, the Boeing Company, estimates that annually the world's major airlines spend 20% of their budgets on maintenance, a cost of over $40 billion. Based purely on economics, these results demonstrate why it would make sense for an airline to upgrade their fleets.
new aircraft coming out of Boeing, Boeing has attached about a 75,000 cycle life limit to those aircraft. A cycle is a takeoff and a landing. That's considered one cycle.
With airplanes reaching the end of their life cycles, the cost of keeping them at airport hangars and maintenance yards becomes economically prohibitive. The sensible solution is to take these airplanes to a place where they can be stored cheaply, a spot that's out of the way, and with plenty of space. This is the Mojave Desert in Southern California, home to hundreds of dormant airplanes, each one at a different stage in its career. Many of these airplanes will eventually be returned to their respective fleets or sold off to another airline company. This former American Airlines MD-11 will soon be put into freight service for FedEx. But before any of these planes can serve the private or commercial sectors again, they must be given a tune-up. In order to reduce the negative impact of engine emissions on the environment and jet noise on neighborhoods, the Federal Aviation Administration enacted stricter standards for airplanes, going from Stage 2 to Stage 3 noise restrictions. For airline companies, these stringent new guidelines meant that all of the older, noisier, and biggest polluting aircraft in operation had to be re-engined or scrapped.
Decisions to replace a fleet are pretty complex. I mean, at the end of the day, it starts to talk about the financials of the fleet, the operating cost. How much does it cost to operate that aircraft ongoing? And when you reach a point in the life where, both from a maintenance standpoint and from a fuel performance standpoint, there comes a time when a newer aircraft starts to look like it's a better choice than continuing to fly the aircraft that you have.
Aircraft manufacturers had to streamline. Externally, the goal was to reduce aerodynamic drag. Internally, engineers had to develop more efficient, cleaner, and stronger jet engines. Streamlining could be accomplished either by re-engineering existing aircraft or by building new ones. But to make room for the new ones, the old had to be retired. One of the most popular commercial aircraft built was Lockheed's L-1011. Dozens of airlines around the world, including Air Canada, Air Portugal, and Delta Airlines, all operated large fleets of L-1011s. But as the aircraft aged, most of these carriers had to decide the fate of the plane known as the TriStar.
It was the downtime on the airplane. By downtime, I mean we were finding things that we didn't expect, so we had 1011s consistently coming up with problems, and the airplane then would require heavy repairs and heavier repairs and heavier repairs. So it took a huge amount of resources in terms of people, a huge amount of resources in terms of facilities. It's a big airplane.
Right now you have the newer aircraft primarily are two-engine aircraft, so you have a cost issue both from an operations standpoint and from a maintenance standpoint for a three-engine aircraft versus a two-engine aircraft. Same thing from a flight operations perspective. You have 3 cockpit crew members required to fly the L-1011 versus 2 for most of the newer aircraft.
It was a graceful lady that had passed its peak and was ready to retire.
Occasionally, aircraft undergo service life extension overhauls to increase the number of cycles they are allowed to fly. The L-1011 has an average service life of 60,000 cycles. With an overhaul, this number can be increased by 10,000 cycles. Now, 30 years after its first flight, time has run out on the L-1011. Instead of another overhaul, carriers around the world have decided to replace their TriStar fleets with Boeing's extended range models like the 767 and 777. But just because a model is older doesn't necessarily mean it will be put out of service. The Boeing 747, which was originally built at the same time as the L-1011, is still in demand and still under construction. Currently, Boeing is on the 4th generation of the 747. The three largest operators of the 747-400 jumbo jet include Japan Airlines, British Airways, and Singapore Airlines. The future of the 747 is secure, for now. But what happens to the rest of the older model planes that are not in such high demand? Today, hundreds of airplanes await an uncertain fate at aircraft storage centers around the world. Will they once again soar among the clouds, or have they flown their final flight? This decision must be based upon good business sense, even if there is an emotional attachment to the plane.
Well, you're always sad when you see an aircraft like the L-1011 being cut up. It's been a great aircraft, has a great safety record, still is flying today. Very good passenger customer acceptance of the aircraft, and our pilots love to fly it. I know I love to fly it. You're always a little bit, maybe you shed a little tear when you see an aircraft like that being cut up. Lockheed produced a great aircraft.
The decision to retire an airplane does not necessarily mean that it will be scrapped, but it does bring it one step closer.
As a source of energy, wind power alone can't do it all. Because just to power a city like Paris would take 20,000 turbines. We believe that meeting all our energy needs will take innovation, conservation, and collaboration. Will you join us?
Nothing enhances cognac like 1950s Italian crystal. Exactly. Although these glasses are from the 30s. Alex?
Well, I can't speak for the glasses, but this Martel Cordon Bleu is magnificent. Actually, it was 1920s French crystal.
But what's a few decades between friends?
Only a few can tell. Martel Cordon Bleu.
I started losing my sight when I was about 10 years old. It's a condition that affects the photoreceptor cells in the retina. I've come to realize that the difficulties will always be there, but I think the important thing is how to overcome the obstacles. Sports has been an important feature in my life. I've taken part in quite a number of swimming competitions. In 2003, I participated in an open sea charity swim. Swimming in the open elements, I had to compete with nature. The ebbs and flow of the sea was, of course, a reflection of what life's journey is. I hope that the challenges I have faced so far, it will shape me to be a better person.
There are times when we all need a little extra strength. With AIA Accident and Health Insurance, you'll find it.
My life is dedicated to maintaining the roots of my people.
The life of a rancher isn't easy, but it's the life I love.
Let me show you the real Australia.
Discovery Atlas, Australia revealed in 3 days on Discovery Channel. Discovery Atlas is brought to you by beautiful Thai Airways. Some think breakfast. We think research. Some think privileged. We think customized solution. Some think 2 generations. We think succession planning. Whatever your vision, we at Credit Suisse seek new perspectives to make it a reality. Where will you find a hotel that's truly beyond the ordinary? In Milan, at the corner of art and commerce. In Moscow, at the intersection of old world charm and the new economy. In Shanghai, where 5,000 years meets tomorrow. In Chicago, right where form merges with function. In fact, around the world,
once the decision has been made to retire and store an airplane, it's moved to one of the carrier's maintenance bases. Here the process is begun and the airplane is prepared for storage. To begin with, the airplane's company logos are removed. Removing the logo serves three purposes. First, it indicates that the plane may be available for lease or sale. Second, it secures the company's image. To have a company plane sitting in the desert may mistakenly create an illusion of declining business stability and strength. Finally, if someone were to fly the plane and become involved in an incident, the company may be unfairly associated with the event. The next step in the process is cocooning, a procedure in which all of the plane's intakes and air vents are covered. This prevents dust from contaminating sensitive components and keeps unwanted passengers from entering the aircraft. Passenger windows are also cocooned to protect them from the harsh desert environment. Time is always critical when deciding a plane's fate. Airlines lose money when one of their jets isn't in the air, so it's not in their best interest to let them sit in storage too long. Also, a large number of airplane parts have expiration dates. If an airplane is ever going to fly again, these expired parts must be replaced, even if they were never actually used. Many of these airplanes have not flown enough hours to reach their average life expectancy. With this in mind, the airline companies must decide on what to do with their excess inventory of multi-million-dollar aircraft.
In order to make a decision between whether you sell an aircraft or whether you part it out, encompasses two or three different issues. One is there a market for the aircraft? Secondly, there are no parts because it is not being produced anymore, so consequently manufacturers say, well, I'm not going to produce and or repair and overhaul parts, so it's difficult to even find a repair facility.
Because ever-evolving technology has created more efficient airplanes, the older models such as the 727, DC-10, L-1011, and early 747s are all being phased out. Once manufacturers stop producing replacement parts for these aging aircraft, airlines are forced to cannibalize parts from their stored jets to keep the in-service planes flying. But if it's simply not cost-effective to keep the plane in service, then it's sent to the scrapper.
The first thing we do when we receive an aircraft for teardown is we need to do a survey. And our survey checks for immediately any hazardous wastes or fluids that we might find on board the aircraft.
In the world of aircraft scrapping, part-out companies operate with a team of experts. Their specialty, stripping airplanes of their most valuable components. Typically, the first items to be removed are the plane's engines. These monster power plants can weigh up to 6 tons each. In most cases, the engines will be reused.
So what are you looking for here? The notches primarily. This has very few notches. These blades are actually in good shape.
Depending on which model aircraft, some of them are upwards of millions of dollars.
Although an aircraft's engines are usually its most valuable and reusable component, this is not always the case. Some engines, like that of Lockheed's L-1011, will never be used again.
The L-1011, RB-211 was specifically manufactured or built for the L-1011. With the L-1011 dying out, there really isn't a need for, there's probably an overbearance of engines available.
If an engine is unusable or obsolete, it will be parted out and scrapped for its titanium and other valuable metals. This is Dale Lackey. He has more than 30 years of experience in the aviation industry. Before entering the world of airplane recycling, he was a quality control engineer in the flight test departments of Boeing and McDonnell Douglas. Once responsible for building airplanes, he's now in the business of taking them apart.
To remove an engine or a landing gear, for that matter, on a 747 looks like a huge project, but for the most part it requires a great deal of finesse and the right equipment. Believe it or not, there's only 3 bolts that hold it on. So that's pretty quick and easy, but there are many lines, fittings, hoses, and what have you that need to be undone, and you need to know what you're doing. Safety's a factor, and you don't want to damage anything either.
Once the engines are safely removed, part-out crews are next in line to handle the airplane. Their job is to strip the interior of the jetliner, beginning with the cockpit.
First thing we go for in the cockpit would be the gauges, the instruments, and the flight controls. Then in so-called black boxes in the avionics compartment, black boxes being weather radar, electronic and electrical control boxes. Then beyond that will be the mechanical and the hydraulic actuators, pumps.
Though they are in the business of recycling, there are a number of items that the part-out companies will not resell. These range from batteries to high-pressure items such as hydraulic reservoirs and filters, many of which are considered hazardous materials. These particular components require handling by specialists trained in their disposal. From the mechanics to the smelters, parting out aircraft giants requires the talents of many individuals, and although the part-out industry itself is not subject to federal regulation, the parts they remove are. Mechanics licensed by the Federal Aviation Administration carefully remove each part and individually tag them. Once the item is tagged, the mechanic signs his license number to it, establishing a trace that follows the part through the whole recycling process: removal, overhaul, and finally installation into another aircraft.
When we remove these parts from the aircraft, we are concerned that they will be safe, although this is only the first step in that process of returning them to service. If it is obvious a part is not good, we will not bother with it. We will scrap it on the spot. If it seems to be good in a as-removed condition, as we call it, we will tag it, certify it, and ready it to move on to a repair shop for overhaul as needed. None of these parts will go back on an aircraft in the condition they come off. But there again, at each step, each and every one of us are concerned about the ultimate safety.
Once an aircraft's reusable parts have been removed, tagged, and sent for overhaul, the part-out company will then sell off the remaining bits and pieces.
We get to the point where all of the actuators, pumps, as I said, engines, mechanical gearboxes and so forth, and previously mentioned black boxes, all of that is removed. That's the great. We still have a lot of interior, seats, and so forth. Those can be sold. There's a good deal of labor in removing those. But once we get that out, we'd like to have it down to a bare fuselage. So there's really not much more than aluminum and some steel. At that point, the gear would still be under it, so we can tow it to the far side of the airport where it is in fact cut and demolished and moved on as a scrap material for recycling.
Though scrapping aircraft is a regular part of today's aviation industry, it could hardly have been imagined in the dream of two brothers over 100 years ago. Mankind's centuries-old desire to fly was realized on December 17, 1903, when the Wright brothers accomplished the first controlled, powered flight. A decade later, the world became entangled in one of the bloodiest wars ever recorded, World War I. As armies battled across the European continent, a new weapon was introduced, the aeroplane. Originally built for aerial observation, it wasn't long before the role of the airplane was expanded into the deadly arena of combat. World War I introduced aerial bomb drops and dogfights. It was the era of aces. As a result of the war, an aviation arms race began. Countries worked around the clock to build their air forces. By the end of World War II, this massive buildup of planes came to a screeching halt. Surplus military aircraft flooded storage yards across the country. Stockpiling these military aircraft in the desert was part of an essential financial strategy. Covering over 5 square miles, this storage facility in Kingman, Arizona was one of the largest military airplane storage facilities of the era. The U.S. government and aircraft manufacturers both understood that if these planes entered the private sector, it would have an overwhelmingly negative impact on the sales of new airplanes and consequently on the country's economy. Because of this, nearly 75% 90% of these were stripped of their reusable parts and scrapped. The method for disassembling airplanes was dramatic. Large, heavy plates of steel, resembling the blade of a guillotine, were used to chop the airplanes into manageable sections. These sections were either burnt where they stood or dropped into the smelter's furnace and melted down into large bricks. These bricks could weigh as much as 1,500 pounds each. At the end of the Korean War, the U.S. faced a similar problem, and many military aircraft like the Douglas C-124 Globemaster and Boeing's KC-97 Stratotanker were placed into storage. Like many aircraft, the C-124 had its own unique significance. It was the first aircraft that carried most of the U.S. Army's oversized equipment, which included heavy trucks and tanks. A small number of these transport airplanes were fortunate enough to enter the civilian sector as private collection pieces or museum displays. But for the majority of them, the situation was grim. Just like the Stratotanker, the C-124 was being sent to meet the scrapper's blade. The man who made the first flight of the prototype C-124 reflects on the aircraft and its destruction.
It was a delightful airplane to fly. The control forces were light enough. They were not heavy. We were able to maneuver the airplane as though it was a light airplane.
Although nearly 300 of these planes were built, only 10 survive today. 8 can be found on American military bases, and 1 is on display in Seoul, South Korea. This is number 10. It was flown from Davis-Monthan Air Force Base to Las Vegas, Nevada, with plans to convert it into an aviation-themed restaurant. But with insufficient funding, the project never got off the ground and the plane sat unprotected for nearly 20 years. Vandalized and decaying, the plane became an eyesore and finally had to be removed. It's a sad fate for a proud bird, but every now and again there is a happy ending. On occasion, historic airplanes can be partially saved by becoming a part donor to another airplane in need. This Boeing KC-97 Stratotanker sat derelict for years in Stockton, California. Specializing in aviation archaeology and the restoration of historic aircraft, the Lost Birds Aviation Museum in Mojave, California, acquired the former Air Force aerial refueling platform with plans to restore it. But after their initial inspection, the museum crew discovered a problem: large amounts of corrosion to the fuselage. The museum then faced another dilemma: the demand from the airport to have the plane removed. Just as all seemed lost, the museum learned of an aircraft restoration project in need of the KC-97's wings and tail section.
And the Lost Birds Aviation Museum is nice enough to help us. They had an aircraft that they had to dispose of, C-97, and has common wings and tail, so it really was great for us. It's enabled us to have the tools to put the airplane together.
The recipient of the C-97's wings and tail was the Planes of Fame Air Museum headquartered in Chino, California. Planes of Fame owned a historic B-50, which had been damaged in a landing accident.
The aircraft had an accident where it had a fuel problem shortly after takeoff, and the crew had to put it down and bellied it in and damage the airplane. And because it was so historical and its non-stop flight around the world, that it was saved and became an Air Force display.
Thanks to the cooperation of these two airplane enthusiast groups, this remarkable airplane will be displayed in its original form. But as satisfying as it is to see an airplane preserved, there are times when they will be called upon to participate in a more noble cause. Sometimes government and aviation authorities must destroy them to better understand and prevent real-life tragedies. December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Flight 103 goes down over Lockerbie, Scotland, the victim of a terrorist bomb hidden within a suitcase. The tragedy prompted the aviation world to begin studying ways of preventing similar disasters in the future. The first concern is to prevent a bomb from making it on board. Therefore, improved security equipment was installed in airports around the world meant to detect dangerous materials and weapons of mass destruction. But assuming an explosive device does get on board, aircraft manufacturers began looking at ways to contain a bomb's explosive force within the plane's cargo area, increasing cabin survivability for passengers. While developing newer ways to make air travel safer, government agencies around the world have formed their own unique ways to scrap an airplane. This L-1011 was used in an FAA bomb test in 1998 to demonstrate the destructive capabilities of just a small amount of explosives. And this DC-6 was part of a crash impact study designed to increase passenger safety in the event of a crash. But possibly one of the most dramatic examples of the government's use of airplanes for testing was the controlled impact demonstration shown here at Edwards Air Force Base using a radio-controlled Boeing 720. The focus of the test was to demonstrate the properties of an experimental jet fuel which contained an anti-misting additive. The cabin was filled with dummies and instrumented to measure impact loads and temperatures. The goal was to determine whether a passenger would have a greater probability of survival in a plane crash involving the new fuel. For the test flight, the 720's tanks were filled with 76,000 pounds of anti-misting kerosene. The test provided valuable data that has been incorporated into the cabin construction of today's modern aircraft. But not every airplane used in government testing goes through such dramatic maneuvers. In the war against terrorism, numerous federal agencies have decided to go with more realistic training scenarios, increasing the need for retired airplanes. This former American Airlines 727 was adopted by the Drug Enforcement Agency and moved to a training site near San Diego, California. Similarly, the U.S. Customs Service Special Response Teams in Miami, Florida, practice their tactical training exercises using this retired 727. Like the DEA agents, Customs Special Agents trained to deal with hijacking, drug smuggling, and terrorist takeover scenarios which may occur aboard a commercial airplane.
Get down! Get down! Get down! Police!
Because of the methods of the terrorist attacks of September 11th, these types of training operations have become an absolute necessity. The occurrences of 9/11 ravaged the airline industry worldwide. With the public's confidence shaken, travel plans were canceled in droves, and many airline companies were forced to park their surplus aircraft or accelerate the retirement of the older members of their fleet. Production lines continued to roll out new planes even though the airlines had no immediate need for them. Most were flown from the factory to storage centers to await better financial times. Despite the infusion of government cash into the crippled airline industry, the scenario appeared grim. With hundreds of airplanes grounded globally, the airline industry was forced to make a decision regarding the future of their fleets. And given the circumstances, it was an easy one. They chose to maintain the newer, more cost-efficient planes and ground the older ones. This meant that the gas-guzzling 727s, DC-10s, and other pre-1980s aircraft would be the first to be removed from service. Their time in the air was coming to an end. Scrapping these metal giants is an intense process. After the engines and all valuable components have been removed, the gutted fuselage is transferred to the scrappers area for the final phase. From this point on, the airplane's existence is determined entirely by the scrapper's schedule. Cutting up an airplane is a hazardous job and safety is of the utmost importance. To avoid igniting any liquid flammables that may have settled in the fuel tanks or hydraulic lines, welding torches are rarely used in disassembly. Keeping a good distance from the plane increases safety. That's why scrappers do most of their work with heavy equipment. An excavator is a typical piece of equipment used to chop up airplanes. More commonly found on construction sites, they are the perfect tool for the scrappers. This excavator has a grappler on the end of its working arm, resembling a T-Rex. Its claw is used to rip and tear at an airplane and transport the pieces to a nearby dumpster. Jim Schwartzhoff is an excavator operator who specializes in scrapping aircraft.
It's a job, you know.
And every scrapper has a favorite part of their job.
I like cutting.
And the machine Jim likes to cut with is this hydraulic excavator. It has a rotating head equipped with a 27-inch shear that produces nearly 700 tons of cutting pressure. Strong enough to bite through a 17-inch steel I-beam, this monster machine can bully around any size airplane. It rips. It tears. It crushes. And it transports. But when the scrappers do need to get up close, they bring in the heavy-duty saws. Discovering the best equipment for scrapping has been a process of trial and error.
Oh, yeah, you get better each time. In the early days of scrapping aircraft, they started out with skill saws with metal cutting blades. Then they got into torches, which is fine, but you don't cut aluminum, you melt it, takes a lot of time. And they got the gas saws in. They look like a big giant chainsaw with a grinding wheel on it, cutting disc. Eventually they got into using heavy equipment with like a 225 cat with a 40R shear, which is like a big set of scissors to cut it up. And then you've cut the time down from normally where it would take 3-4 weeks just to cut a plane up. You can cut a plane up in about 2 days, pack it in boxes, and move it off the premises.
David Kramer is the president of Alameda Metals, an aircraft recycling center based in Lancaster, California. He operates one of the scrapping yards at Mojave Airport, where airplanes are dismantled for their reusable metals.
We generally start with the interior, and we try to remove all the non-recyclable materials, such as the plastic walls and ceilings and luggage bins, carpet, seats, anything that is non-metallic will be removed generally.
So what do you got going on there?
Okay, I'm going on the left side of the plane. I'm dropping the PSUs, getting ready for shipment.
And PSUs are what now?
Passenger service modules that supplies oxygen. They're canisters that gives you the air to breathe in emergency.
Then we work our way to the outside of the airplane. Because the wings are bulky, we'll generally cut the wings off first, then just continue to cut. We'll usually cut the cockpit off next, and just work our way back down on the plane.
I think it's great out here watching them crush these things up. We watched them take the nose off. It took about 8 minutes for them to get the nose off of that jet over there. Pretty good, pretty impressive.
The flow of aircraft, it varies per make and model. If we have smaller narrow-body aircraft, we're able to process those aircraft typically within a week or less. The larger aircraft, such as L-1011s or 747s, the wide-body aircraft, they can take up to 3 weeks to process. The wide-body aircraft are obviously much bigger, harder to deal with, and the interiors are more complicated. They have a lot more material that we need to remove. Each aircraft depends upon its configuration and how we receive it. The configuration of the aircraft depends upon the prior owner. If the aircraft was used in a cargo configuration, the aircraft arrives to us in a very clean state. That is, there's no interior inside of it. If, however, the aircraft was used in passenger service, then there are seats, there are carpets, there are walls to be taken out, and that can be very time-consuming.
This is the harsh reality of aircraft scrapping. But now and again, on its way to the scrapper's yard, an airplane may be diverted, temporarily, to perform one more role. Since airplanes have always captured our imagination, it's no surprise that they would be a big hit on the silver screen. Public intrigue with aviation after World War I, along with an abundance of out-of-work pilots, proved to be the perfect combination for a burgeoning new medium of the time, moving pictures. The silent aviation films of post-World War I began a long collaboration between airplanes and Hollywood. In the 1920s, aircraft brokers such as Rigo Balboni began offering whole and partial aircraft to the movie industry. Pieces such as cockpits and sectioned-out fuselages gave filmmakers the luxury of capturing a pilot's facial expressions and hand gestures without ever having to take the cameras into the air. Today, little has changed. Mark Thompson's Aviation Warehouse in Adelanto, California, is one of the world's largest suppliers of aircraft to the movie industry.
We have everything from little Cessnas to fighter jets to airliners. The big, I guess you'd say, break into the movie industry is when we did a 2-hour special for the show Emergency. I was about to cut up a 707 at Long Beach Airport, and the show came to me and says, we want that for a prop.
Over the years, Thompson has provided airplanes for more than 250 productions, including such blockbuster films as Con Air and Air Force One.
One of the more challenging would be like the job we did on Hero, where we took an airplane that flew into Mojave Airport. We disassembled it, cut it up with saws, transported it 90 miles, put it back together on a bridge as though it had crashed on the bridge, altered the bridge to make it look like it was destroyed from the crash, and then filled the land below it with water to make it look like it crashed into the water. Most planes will last about 5 shows before it's just nothing but rubble. But we do a lot of shows where we need rubble, where we need 8, 10, and as many as 20 semi-loads of crash material. So we keep all this stuff. We did movies like Star Trek V and Pearl Harbor, where we supplied a lot of crash material.
But the movie industry isn't the only entertainment field where the airplane has played a significant part. While most sports teams around the globe charter their travel to get from game to game, a few franchises own their own aircraft. For decades, Major League Baseball's Los Angeles Dodgers operated their own team plane. During the early 1950s, when they were known as the Brooklyn Dodgers, the team was flown from city to city on this Douglas DC-3. Through the years, the team upgraded to several different types of airplanes. The last plane owned by the now Los Angeles Dodgers franchise was a jet-powered Boeing 720 named the KO-2. This airplane was seen at airports all around the country during baseball season. In 1983, this aircraft, along with many others of its type, was acquired by the U.S. government to be used as a parts source for the nation's fleet of active aerial refuelers. Just as the KO-2 was being scrapped, the Lost Birds Museum stepped in and saved the only remaining piece, the cockpit.
Preserving the Dodgers Boeing 720 cockpit was not only for aviation enthusiasts and historians, but it also gives sports fans the opportunity to see how one of the most popular teams in baseball history traveled.
With plans underway to restore the nose section, KO-2's cockpit will be displayed at the Lost Birds Aviation Museum in Mojave, California.
Watch history come alive in a whole new light with Philips Ambilight TV. Turn up your experience.
When I heard my name, I was a little bit surprised, and kind of at the same time, I kind of felt like it was going to happen after seeing everybody else's films, which were good.
I'm flabbergasted. I really didn't think it was going to happen, and I'm very, very happy.
I'm totally excited. Be creative, be yourself, and just let your heart lead you.
I joined this competition because I wanted to expose the possibility of using Nokia gadgets and electronic gadgets in medical research.
The contestants from other countries, I think they're very, very good, but now I got a chance again. And somehow, maybe you should watch out.
Presented by Nokia, connecting people. A landmark documentary on this continent of contrasts, narrated by Russell Crowe. Discovery Atlas, Australia Revealed. The journey begins in 3 days, exclusively on Discovery Channel. Discovery Atlas is brought to you by beautiful Thai Airways.
Where will you find a hotel that's truly beyond the ordinary? In Milan, at the corner of art and commerce. In Moscow, at the intersection of old world charm and the new economy. In Shanghai, where 5,000 years meets tomorrow. In Chicago, right where form merges with function. In fact, around the world, you'll find it at Hyatt.
In a land of secrets, a beautiful maiden embarks on a journey of discovery to uncover once hidden truths, question ancient histories, and unveil stories that were once carried in the wind. Till now. Chinese Whispers starts Monday, 23rd October on Discovery Channel.
Didn't have a crime, we didn't have a victim, we didn't have evidence of anything.
I wish I could tell you how I know these things. I sat there in meditation for a little while. With that, I had a vision. The image I kept having was this naked body, multiple wounds, rape.
All the information that she saw was exactly the truth.
Crime Scene Psychics, tomorrow night on Discovery Channel.
We've shown many different ways in which retired airplanes can still be useful in the movies, as museum displays, for military training, and government testing to improve public safety and anti-terrorism efforts. But ultimately, they all share a common fate. The Before the first cut is made, each airplane is surveyed for foreign metals such as titanium, magnesium, and stainless steel. Each of these metals are then separated from the scrapper's primary goal, aluminum. The main alloy used in building an aircraft is called 7075 aluminum. Raw 7075 is the reason the scrappers are in business. This alloy has a wide variety of industrial and commercial uses and is cheaper to recycle than to refine. The separated metals from scrapped airliners are fed into the smelter's furnace and melted down. The molten metals are poured into ingots, which are then sold to the metal processing industry. They, in turn, use the recycled metals in the production of canning, computers, and automobile engine parts. This is the final step in the scrapping process and the eventual destiny of almost every airplane. How and why an airplane and its parts are recycled is a matter of economics, changing aviation technologies, and improved passenger comfort and safety. The reusable parts of each airplane are inspected and returned to the fleet, which helps keep down the cost of air travel. For every aircraft reduced to ingots, another newer, safer, and more environmentally friendly airplane is delivered to the airlines. Every scrapped aircraft represents a tiny piece of history. Families traveling on vacation, precious cargo getting to its destination, a country flexing its military might. However, most of these time capsules will fade into the sunset of the desert. And although it's hard to imagine this magnificent symbol of man's ingenuity reduced to a mountain of rubble, it is a mark of industrial progress. Newer, stronger, and safer airplanes will replace them, taking us higher, faster, and further.